the Democratic Party is supposedly the party that believes in science, right? From the standpoint of the Republican Party, we don't believe in the scientists from the standpoint of climate change. That's the dogma of the Republican Party. Mind you, Donald Trump's own report talked about this kind of hellscape within 2100 or by 2100. But whatever. The official policy for the most part is they don't believe in science. And so because they don't necessarily believe in this climate change nonsense, there's no conflict. There's no conflict of interest. They can be obsequious to oil companies. They can take all of this money and do these favors for these oil companies. There is no issue at all. Drill, baby, drill. Let's get every ounce of oil out of the ground. They can do that. There's no conflict of interest. But what about the Democratic Party? I mean, often the Democratic Party is the party that snarls that they believe in science. We believe in climate change and we're going to take action about it. The United Nations has just said we have 12 years to avert a disaster. 12 years for radical, transformative changes to our energy structure. And I would even go so far as to the way we eat our food itself. Now, this goes headlong into the capitalistic system. I mean, after all, you have this system that allows you, let's use your computer, for example. All of these integral little components that are part of your computer. Now, from the standpoint of the manufacturer, if your computer was made to last for, let's say, 10 years, that guy will go out of business. So he has a natural incentive, natural as the day is long, to make sure that computer only lasts a certain amount of time. So you can essentially buy another one and buy another one and buy another one, as opposed to conservation and being able to hold on to that device for longer, making your product last longer. I'm just making a very basic point that it goes to the heart of this thing of maximizing profit for people to make things that require you to continuously buy those things. Now, how? You're one of the parties. You're the one major party in the country that says they believe in science. And the UN, a panel of these scientists, bring out a hair-on-fire report saying you have 12 years left to avert disaster. You're the adults in the room, right? How can you say you believe in science but not be bound by the edicts of science? There's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet. Now, you as a human being with eyes look and see the asteroid that's going to hit the planet. The Republican Party said it doesn't exist, so okay. But your party, screams about how much you believe in science, even browbeats the Republican Party on debate stages and make them get up there and say you don't believe in science. Make that case to the American public. How? How do you see the asteroid? How do you acknowledge that an asteroid that's going to hit the planet? And after all, you're acknowledging it because you say you believe in science. These guys say there's 12 years. How do you acknowledge that there's an asteroid that's going to hit the planet, but don't do anything substantial to deal with it? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, there's a protest going on in Nancy Pelosi's office. A youth group called Sunrise is essentially trying to force, shame, browbeat the Democratic Party to live up to what it says it already believes in. Hey, if you say there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, we say there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, you're in the position to try to do something about it. What are you waiting on? Now, they get a special guest. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez storms the barricades of sorts and storms Nancy Pelosi's office, giving support to this group, the Sunrise Group. Now, I did this video once before, but I had to do this video again because I realized there was no sound. For whatever reason, my device is screwing up and it's missing the sound component. So I am doing this video again. Take a look at the scene. This electric scene by Ocasio. Because there's two parts to this. So here's the first part.
one of you for putting yourselves and your bodies and everything on the line to make sure that we save our planet, our generation, and our future. It's so incredibly important. I shared with you all, and I shared my story that my journey here started at Standing Rock, and it started with everyday people doing exactly what you all were doing too. It was standing with the Lakota Sioux, standing with allies, standing with indigenous tribes, because we don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. We have to get to 100% renewable energy in 10 years. There is no other option. The IPCC let us know that. And what I hope we all show is that this moment and this rallying point, it's not just about confrontation, but in a way it's about real, meaningful unity behind our goals. That's what this is about.
I like seeing that. I like that. I mean, that's essentially her going to Nancy Pelosi's office, showing support to the group, saying that, yes, we don't have a choice. We have to do something about this. This is a dramatically dangerous circumstance that we have. The other people are batshit crazy. At the very least, let's try to shame this party into doing something about it. I have to be honest, I am very pessimistic about this, and I'm going to explain why. But she goes further in this and having a conversation saying with Pelosi on this point. And listen to this. I have to be honest. I like her, and I like what's taking place from the standpoint of politics of this, because she's trying to shame Pelosi into action. Or the next Speaker of the House. That's assuming that it's Pelosi.
One of the things that I admire so much about Leader Pelosi is that she comes from a space of activism and organizing, and so I think that she really appreciates civic engagement. And really, what I'm here to do is just to support the folks who are here.
I don't know much about Pelosi, so fair enough. What I would guarantee you is she does not care about civic engagement. And maybe you didn't see that. Let me make sure the scene is flipped. Let's try this one more time.
You know, one of the things that I admire so much about Leader Pelosi is that she comes from a space of activism and organizing, and so I think that she really appreciates civic engagement. And really, what I'm here to do is just to support the folks who are here.
Now, this is just politics, and let me explain what I mean. Pelosi and Ocasio has very different bases. From one standpoint, her base wants something fundamentally different, meaning Ocasio's. The thing is, her base is for the most part in line with what the Democratic Party wants anyway, meaning voters, not necessarily the people who are in Congress. But when you ask them, they want action on climate change. They want minimum wage, and let's stay with action on climate change. So she's not necessarily wrong, and she is perfectly in harmony with her base because her base wants this. They didn't send her there to be a corporate hack. They sent her there to do stuff like this and to try to push the agenda and push the narrative forward. Pelosi, either she is insane, meaning Ocasio-Cortez, or she knows exactly that Pelosi doesn't want the civic engagement. The last thing Pelosi wants is a big red circle to be drawn on one of the Democratic failures. That is not what Pelosi wants at all, which is kind of the point of why Ocasio came there in the first place, because this is not about what Pelosi wants. This is about trying to push the narrative and push the agenda, and not necessarily allowing the party to fall back into its old tropes of, yes, we have Speaker of the House, or yes, we have a House now we can essentially do fuckery. Apparently, a lot of this came because Pelosi said she was looking for bipartisan support with Trump, which sets off, I guess, alarm bells for these certain lefty groups. Let's go into the story a little bit further, because there is one question I have after all of this is said and done. Congresswoman-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joined 150 youth activists in Tuesday's sit-in in House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi's Capitol Hill office, where the group called for congressional action on climate change. Ocasio-Cortez joined the members of the Sunrise Movement and Justice Democrats in the demonstration, which lasted for an hour. I actually like this. She was elected as part of a movement. She intends to govern as part of a movement, said Corbin Trent, a spokesman for Ocasio-Cortez. She thinks there is no other priority that should be focused on and support the Sunrise Movement call for the Democratic plan to create a transition economy to zero carbon. Jesus Christ, I'm totally not reading that right. Zero carbon economy, so we can have that ready to go when we take back the presidency in 2020. And they were handing the messages. California is burning. Fossil fuels billionaires have a grip on American democracy. We're running out of time to act. But we're going to win. We'll pass a green energy new deal and win the solutions we need. We will win because we have the movement behind us. Now, let's see. The Sunrise Movement are proposing something a bit more rough and ready, a Green New Deal. Now, the reason Pelosi responded to this, but she gave this kind of watered-down, milquetoast response. All right, so let's start right here. Justice Democrats, another progressive organization, joined the Sunrise activists primarily made up of youth protesters. The impetus behind the demonstration is sparked by Mrs. Pelosi's intention to promote a bipartisan marketplace of ideas and relaunch a toothless special committee from 2007 on climate change, which resulted in weak cap-and-trade legislation passing the House before failing in the Democratic-controlled Senate. The Sunrise Movement are proposing something a bit more rough and ready, a Green New Deal. The Green New Deal would involve establishing a new select committee tasked specifically to write policy for creating jobs, moving our country off of fossil fuels, designed for the 12 years of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has given us. Well, it's not that they've given you anything. They've just, based on their models, they're making an argument that there's 12 years, but it's not necessarily something that they're giving you. It's something that they're reporting. Let's not mistake the model for the real thing. And we don't even necessarily know if that model is completely accurate. It could be worse than 12 years. We couldn't assume 12 years. Sunrise has turned to Democrats to take charge in combating climate change since the GOP is completely corrupted in dirty oil money. So is the Democratic Party. I'm sorry, so are they. And will stall us at every turn. In doing so, the environmentalist groups is requiring Democratic leadership to take the no fossil fuel money pledge. The pledge mandates Democratic leadership to reject any and all campaign donations offered from fossil fuels corporations and lobbyists. Mrs. Pelosi released a statement on Tuesday expressing her support for the Sunrise dedication environmental activism and reinstating the select committee to address the crisis. But the activist said that her words are not enough, suggesting she step down from the Democratic leadership if she cannot commit to joining the Green New Deal platform. In response, Sunrise released their own statements welcoming Mrs. Pelosi's support, but making note that her words alone are not enough. 42 have perished in Pelosi's home state of California from drought fires in the last few days alone. Her solution is to resurrect a committee with no funding and no power to take legislative action. The statement read, before saying that Pelosi should step down from the Democratic leadership if she fails to implement the Green Energy New Deal mandate. And right here, this is what they added. And if she doesn't, if Pelosi comes out there and say, I'm not doing squat, period, and shuts her door, what are you going to do? I guess what I'm asking you is, what is accountability here? What does accountability mean in this context? I agree with everything that has just happened. I agree with the protests. I agree with the sit-ins. I agree with Ocasio-Cortez and shaming them. I agree with all that. And if at the end of that, Pelosi says the Republican Party is batshit crazy, we are going to give you tepid change that's not really going to be change at all. So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? What does accountability mean in this context? I mean, yes, you can continue to run people and you may or may not win, but what does it mean in this context? Does that mean that you're willing to let Democrats lose? And if the answer is that you're not willing to let Democrats lose, and Pelosi and Bill Clinton were right, you have nowhere else to go. So what you want doesn't necessarily matter. Now, yes, you can run in primaries. I think Cal gives a more glowing review of the primaries, at least from the federal level, than I would. On state level, there have been successes, at least from the standpoint of lefties. But if she says no, I mean, the answer or the thing that you're confronting is the same thing that you've always confronted. I mean, at the end of the day, the Democratic Party has a model where there'll be least worse. The other party is batshit crazy and is off the reservation, so you can't count on that other party for anything. And because you can't count on that other party for anything, the Democratic Party can only look at you and say, what are you going to do about it? How do you make them feel pain in this situation when the Republican Party is so batshit crazy? You have nowhere else to go. Until that's confronted and that model is broken, nothing changes. I'm sorry. I don't see how this changes under any particular situation when, look, I don't want to shit on this because I like this. I like the fact that she's doing this. I like the fact that she's going to this office and is shaming Nancy Pelosi. But shaming to what end? If Nancy Pelosi tells you to kick rocks, what do you do? What do you do? That's all. I guess I'm making the point that there needs to be I'm in a different place. I guess I am in this idea that unless many people, millions, pull themselves out of the Democratic Party, nothing changes. Nothing changes. Ed Klein, you can't shame somebody that's shameless. Agreed. Gardenome, we need candidates that will defy the party on the floor of the Senate. Yes, this seems like infighting to me. This is infighting, and it should be infighting. I keep making this argument that the fight that needs to take place is on the Democratic side. The Republicans are batshit crazy. The Republicans are off the reservation. And because they're off the reservation, the sane, sensible, at least any place where you get a decent argument is the Democratic Party. That's the party that needs to change. The model that they use, identity politics, this identity politics model with this will be least worse, needs to be broken. Nothing changes until this you have nowhere else to go turns into this is something that we represent. That is a different thing. We represent X is different than you have nowhere else to go. Those are two very different models of governance. There is no party that represents workers. There is no party that full-throatedly represents the climate change thing that she's talking about. And we're at a precipice here where the United Nations is saying, or scientists around the world are saying, you have 12 years left. Why is this a debate? And why do you have to push them so hard to do something that is in the best interest of the country and just good goddamn sense? And you know the answer to that revolves around what's being shoved in their pockets and their G-strings. So come on. Come on, let's be honest. Trina be fine. I think it's bringing the golden socialists to appease the protesters. Well, I mean, that's okay, you're a little bit more cynical than I am on this one. I don't think Nancy Pelosi wants the socialists there. I honestly don't. I really don't think Nancy Pelosi wants her there. This draws a red circle around the failures of the Democrats. The question becomes, like you said, can you shame somebody who's shameless? I'm skeptical of that. I'm skeptical of that. Edward Kleincal is fucking unbearable. I had to unsub him. I don't think he's unbearable. The 12 years less shit is ridiculous. The death wave is already on its way. Huge portions of the food chain are dying. Garden, I agree with you on that. These guys, this is a conservative estimate. That's the part that's fucked up. Like 12 years is nonsense. People keep talking about this 12-year stuff like it's a model. It's not reality. Those are the difference in those things. That's a conservative estimate of time change, of what we have, of time that you have left. Conservative. That's a conservative estimate. No, I think we fucked ourselves royally, honestly. And them using this 12-year stuff is, no. We're at a precipice here where there is no time to do this incremental nonsense. And even whether there's time or not, the country doesn't want it. It's time for Nancy Pelosi to step aside. Step aside. If you can't do a big, bold agenda, if you're doing this piecemeal nonsense, step aside. Step aside. The study was released this year but began 2-3 years ago. Yes. Democrats' plan for everything is to lay down and get fucked with a sandpaper condom with no Vaseline and get slapped by the corporate pimps, and the socialists are fucking it up. Board the ship. Board the ship is right. I'm not getting notifications for your channel anymore. I've been kicked out of the club. What? The only solution is incrementally building a third party. God, that feels so... Look, I agree with the third party thing. Yes, Demex. Simultaneously, you have to build allies. Like, there are some Democrats who you can work with. I'm not in this camp. This is why I say support the people who represent your interests. There may be some. If Ojeda was in West Virginia, Ojeda would get my vote. He would. I would do it gladly. That said, I feel there are few and far between. Now, yes, I do think you need to build third party, even if it's only to pressure Democrats. And pull them in a particular direction and force them to appropriate some of those ideas. But more so, you need something that fully represent workers, the 99%, that represents this kind of environmentalism that they're talking about here. You need something that does those things. You need something that does those things. And that's not necessarily what we have. There is no time to waste building a third party. Either people mobilize under broad ideas or they die. Wow. That's pretty candid, Gordon. That's pretty candid. Then we're fucked. Then we're fucked. Do you see anything like that taking place? Honestly, do you see any change in our food habits? Do you see any change in the way that we go about buying our stuff, be it iPhones or Apples or whatever? None of that stuff has changed. None of that stuff. They issued that report to a yawn. You have 12 years left. Yawn. Yawn. If that's the case, Garden, we're already fucked. So, all right. I will end this here. Yeah, I'll end this here. This has gotten morbid. This has gotten very morbid. Ariel, what's going on, Ariel? All right. Cal is basically Cenk minus Russiagate. He's not that bad. He's not that bad. Won't happen, Garden. People refuse to work together. It's more fun that their neighbors to be robbed to get free stuff for themselves. Yeah, Garden, I'm skeptical on this one myself. I'm very skeptical. Mrs. Tree, I'm sorry. I have another show coming up in a very few minutes. So, elect Bob Ramirez now before it's too late. Fuck that. I say elect Progressive Voice. Progressive Voice is the one that needs to be elected. He knows all. He knows all. B. Green, biodiversity loss is a threat as global warming. Demanding that the media be responsible and address the issue should be part of our strategy. Giving up is not an option. I don't think you should give up. You know, for me, I always think it's better to do something than nothing. I think opportunities beget opportunities. Like an idea sometimes springs an unthought of opportunity for something else. And so sitting down and doing nothing, I don't necessarily take as an option. But skeptical, man. I don't see the changes. Because I don't necessarily think, I don't know if that's something that can be imposed. Like, how do you impose that people change the way they eat? How do you impose, you know, the oil and gas company knew going back into the 80s that this was going to be a problem, and climate change was going to be a problem. Even their own scientists. Now, they're under a capitalistic system, and in this capitalistic system, that's not really real, it's more so conceptual. They said it is better for this to keep going, even though we know it. They told us that the world is at stake. And instead of them doing something about it, changing their patterns, they were like, fuck that, we need to bury this. Because after all, this is going to adversely affect our profits when the world realizes that the billions that we're making is off the entirety of the planet itself. Meaning they're externalizing the failures, they're externalizing the chaos to everyone else while they take their billions and hoard their billions. They knew this was going to happen going back in the 80s. Their response, bury the report. Bury the report. Ain't that some shit? The world is at stake, and they're still dicking around in the model that's not even a real model, that's a conceptual framework to which we exist. So yeah, I get a little skeptical. But that still doesn't mean you don't do anything. I don't want to shit on this. This video was supposed to be a good video, and this got dark real fast. Yeah, this got dark real fast. All right, I'll end this here. I guess the question to me is always, what do you do if they don't do it? They look at you, you have nowhere else to go. What do you do? Which is why I make this argument that their failure, even though there are consequences to that, if you want to get anything real done, you have to break that model. That model that has been established over the past 20, 30 years that decouples itself from labor. And when it decouples itself from labor, it says, look, the Republicans are crazy. What are you going to do? And being the politically abused spouse of the Democratic Party, you can beat me, you can slap me, you can have sex with the maid, and I'll still make you a ham sandwich. That model has to be broken if anything real is going to take place. Otherwise, the best that you're going to get is some corporate hack with piecemeal incremental change when you have 12 years left. Come on. Come on. I'll end this here. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.